So with that, why don't I call the meeting to order at 6:11, and we are officially started.
Bill, do you want to start or?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Why don't you outline the workshop?
Sure. So the workshop was, I think, very productive from the council's point of view. At least they said it was. We went through a lot of really good information about the amount of housing, where the pockets of mismatch between the market and the availability. Brian gave a very in-depth presentation about where the pockets of demand were, where there were mismatches. And I think that's very much what the council wanted to focus on, which was help us understand um, where the market's not working and what's the real need. Is it senior housing? Is it workforce housing? And how are we going to determine that? I don't know, Brian, is that a fair assessment of the challenge that they left us?
I think that's right. Karen, you really provided this invaluable data to back the foundational, presentation that we gave. And Bob, I really appreciated you being there, and Jean Marie was there as well. And I think the council appreciated, all of us doing the presentation for them and kind of bringing it back to basics, um, to set the stage for future conversations. They're going to get back to us with, a follow-up from the council priorities session that they had, I think, last week. Um, and and I know that there's a counselor's corner that's going to be focused on housing issues that they hope that we will be present in large numbers to attend, and be a part of. Um, but yeah, I know they're interested in, what do we do? How do we be responsive to the public? How do we be responsive to the true need? And how is Scarborough changing? Um, and my sense, both during and after, was that they found it helpful. Um, Bill Donovan, you were on the other side of the
Yeah,
table.
yeah.
How how were you as a
I think,
consumer of this thing?
well, I think there's some resignation, some frustration on this issue because the council, as a general matter, is very supportive of finding ways to create affordable housing, workforce housing. Uh, and so a lot of the missions of the Housing Alliance are supported strongly by this council. Uh, what I think the council recognizes is Scarborough's housing costs are off the chart. And that makes the thing its biggest problem. So when I saw the agenda to talk about different strategies to pursue, I thought that was a good place for us to look for uh, recommendations to the town council.
Hmm, great. Yeah, and I'll mention, and before we kind of go around the room, one of the things I did hear from the council was it would be really helpful to have some concrete, tangible things uh, to respond to and endorse. So in other words, please give us some ideas of what to support with, to make a difference with housing. Um, and so that was one thing. The other thing that I think we've all been hearing, particularly with some of the proposals that came to us recently, um, is this notion of uh, one, housing is important, two, affordability is important, but it three, we feel like we're probably doing a good job as a community, and then four, it feels a little funny to people, um, that when we use our time, talent, and treasure to build all this housing, it doesn't feel like it's as directly helping the people of Scarborough as people want it to. Um, and it feels like it's sort of helping the next batch of Scarborough residents rather than the current batch of Scarborough residents. And um, and that's a little bit about what's, in item 5 on the agenda is, are there some ways that we could think about to reduce the cost of housing and make housing more affordable for, this batch of Scarborough residents that we have, that will, that'll end up having positive ripple effects for the community.
Yeah, Brian, I felt like at times that they were also asking us to be more specific than I feel like we might be able to be. Like, tell us exactly how many affordable housing units we need and what's too many and what's too little. And that's the thing that I'm not sure that I think we can get to a range of housing units, but I don't know if we can get as specific as perhaps would make them feel comfortable. So I'm not sure what to do with that.
I'm not sure they know the questions asked,
Yeah,
and stuff, and, we were there trying to educate them, and they're trying to figure this out, it's like, why doesn't this work for a certain group of people?
mhm,
And that sort of thing, and, this is a fairly complex problem,
sure.
right? Because it's all based on supply and demand, and when developers are gonna build homes that they know they can sell. And we have programs in place, and you guys are pros on this, I'm still learning this, but we have programs in place to help, workforce housing and help people get into their homes. But they don't match up with current times. They're good programs, they have guidelines and stuff, but price of housing has exceeded, where these people can, they can't afford it 10% or 20% or whatever the number is. And then like, how do we help them without either changing the parameters or percentage of the parameters so more of them can qualify, or seek some assistance, financial assistance from the government and that sort of thing, which is fairly hard thing to do these days.
Mhm.
So anyway, I'm not sure, the council, they're like, what's the problem and how do we fix it? And these are questions been asked for a long time. And what can we do? And that's what I got out of it.
Yeah, and I think if we brought something to the council, they would be very willing to entertain it.
Absolutely.
We don't have a housing authority in Scarborough, and we've had South Portland Housing Authority do what? 2 projects now?
Yeah,
Uh, one and a half.
Okay,
right.
sure.
But I mean, it's sort of an oddity that we have a local housing authority that's identified Scarborough as a good place in which to do workforce and or affordable housing.
Yeah.
Brian, where did that come from? The SOPO's interest in Scarborough?
Yeah, I don't know. I know Scarborough scores well on Main State Housing's QAP, which is how tax credits are allocated. I know Scarborough's a nice town. It's got good rents, and it's probably easier to develop in than South Portland. And it's probably got more land than South Portland. And
We didn't initiate anything with them for
No.
Jocelyn Place.
They approached us.
yeah, I'm not sure about Jocelyn. Um, but yeah, I don't, and certainly not for the one that they're working on right now.
They definitely approached us.
They did.
Yes,
Well,
yes,
Thank
the
you. Say-
town, yeah. And
that speaks to the demand in town,
mhm.
right? A lot of people want to live here. They know that there's available land, there's buildings they can buy up and try to convert and that sort of thing. So it's a great location. That's why most of us are here.
And maybe one of the initiatives we could pursue is a line of communication with South Portland to see if they would like to continue this trend of seeking developments of affordable housing or workforce housing
Yep.
in Scarborough. Because maybe they their eyes on other properties that we would encourage them to pursue.
There's been a lot of housing developers though recently that come through Avesta.
Sure.
It's comparable
Yeah.
too, and I don't know whether you asked them why they came to Scarborough. I don't know if that was part of any exercise. But you've got Developers Collaborative and you've got the Taylor Group that did
Yeah.
Bessie School, and
Right.
you've got
Yeah.
South Portland Housing
Community.
Authority. It's fairly high profile. Not a bad reason to have the South Portland engaged. It's kind of nice, but it's not lost on the development community in Maine. Scarborough's a nice place to be for all the reasons
Yeah.
Brian's talking about.
Well, I do wonder, it's, it's always by default position to want to go and ask people. So
Yes.
I'm wondering,
I mean, I was thinking about outreach.
Yeah, yeah.
You
Yeah.
just named
You-
3 good contacts plus the
Yeah.
South Portland.
right, you could bring Cindy Taylor and, the South Portland folks and Avesta and,
Bunker.
Kevin Bunker. You could bring 5 or 6 of those folks together and just have a nice focus group and say, what have you liked about working in Scarborough? What types of barriers do you see?
Yeah,
And,
right.
and it gets back to, I think ideally, one of the things that I always like to say we've explored is there a way through zoning and through other ordinances that we can encourage people to develop, at least workforce housing,
Absolutely.
without
Yeah.
any involvement. And so if you can tweak your ordinance to make that happen, which I don't know that you can, but if you could, that's something that we should understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're thinking about it all the time.
Yeah,
I mean, I like that, yeah. Sit them down and what works and what doesn't work,
yeah,
why do you come here?
right.
You know,
They have,
Imagine if we could if we know what goes into an affordable housing deal in town, and if we knew that we wanted a certain number of units built or up to a certain number of units built in a certain year, and we could almost not pre-approve, but pre-approve a CEA that said, if your project has these features, you don't need to go through the 27 different meetings that it's going to take to get your application ready for main housing. You could get it done in only 10 meetings or whatever, if what we want is affordable and workforce housing, what can we do to make it easier? And then what can we do in our process design to protect ourselves from what we don't want? I think those are things worth thinking about.
I know that I don't want to speak for the Setco board, but they're, as all economic development organizations are now, very interested in housing, and I think they would gladly help sponsor and reach out and help be a joint sponsor of such a focus group or workshop, and thus allow me to spend a little time reaching out to folks and doing a little staff work on that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that at our July 10th meeting, the Setco board.
That's great.
We don't have enough money
Yeah,
to like do some honest programs in terms of financial sponsorship. So it's all around the edges. It's
yeah,
lowering barriers, and streamlining process.
The programs have all that stuff, right?
And they change.
But it needs to be, you're right, it needs to be streamlined, tweaked, whatever.
Yeah,
And we can dovetail into them as opposed to being heading in another direction. That's helpful. I mean, it's very efficient. I mean, it works, and developers will find Scarborough. They have.
Yep.
But I don't know if we can get to a point where we've got enough financial resources to really make it, compete with what Maine Housing has or anybody else. I think it's just too much.
it'd be an add-on, if
And it's
anything.
horribly expensive to subsidize ongoing operating
Yeah.
costs. if we just couldn't do that, and capital costs, we could perhaps buy a piece. But you can't be the cornerstone of the
No.
financial structure.
Right.
You know,
And-
all of the housing, but whatever on the spectrum of housing you want to do.
But
Bill,
that may
do
be
you-
what you can actually ask these folks,
Yeah.
you know, tell us what your roadblocks are and is there
Yeah.
anything we can do?
Certainly leveraged money is helpful. I mean, they all seek leverage money so they can go someplace else and say, I have commitments and
Exactly.
that parlays things for them. But
Right.
Bill, do you think we could ever, with this group, apply to the Federal Home Loan Bank for, to fund some kind of program that we could administer? Is that, whether it's a down payment program or something else more ambitious?
yeah, I mean, you could talk to the Federal Home Loan Bank members who have branches in Scarborough to see how, because they're the members, right? They would have to offer up a suggestion on our behalf or,
Yeah.
program recommendation.
Feed banks. Yeah,
But main housing's still available as a
Yeah.
resource too. I mean, they're looking to partner or create a pilot program, from time to time.
Yeah.
What's the best way to approach the developers who may have insights into advancing and assisting them? Because I don't know whether there's any competitive element that would cause them not to want to come to a round table arrangement.
You guys know better because you deal with the housing folks more, but I think that's an issue. I think they'd be happy to, they all know each other. They're all partnering and working with each other on different projects. So
It's very competitive, but I don't think they're gonna
right.
divulge any trade secrets.
We're just excited about what we can do.
Yeah, I think they're all fairly civic minded, right?
Yeah, and they know that they're all committed to affordable housing,
Yeah,
and they know it inside and out.
so we could have a workshop style roundtable discussion with them.
Yeah.
Inviting them, with the idea that we're looking for ways to improve their ability to develop affordable or workforce housing in Scarborough.
Right. And I would have, I would suggest we have Autumn and, a few other folks there so that they can hear the developers talk as well. Since planning and
provide
zoning
good
is gonna
feedback,
be,
because Autumn's a sharp,
yeah,
yeah,
also like the idea of Bill proposed, have some sort of discussion with a banker or something.
yeah,
That says, is there grants or money available for assistance in down payment or
They have their
whatever,
own foundations too.
Yeah.
whatever the resource is.
Yeah.
I mean,
true.
The banks have their own foundations, and you just don't know. They would sponsor a really good idea.
Sure.
Mhm.
And a lot of them are very committed to affordable housing.
We certainly have a good portfolio here and
Right.
actually based here in Scarborough, so,
Right. And Chase is in town,
yeah,
and there's a lot of those folks. They're dedicated people at the banks
Mhm.
that focus on community development and housing as a byproduct.
roundtable with that group.
Yeah.
Would be another,
Yeah,
so a financial one as well as a
yeah, that's a great idea.
developer.
yeah. Let's hear all the voices
Yeah.
who make this happen.
Talk to the players, right?
Yeah, exactly. See if we can all collaborate.
Brian, is it one of our guests, I think has an idea, is it okay to call on her? Or you want to wait for public comment?
Well,
So I had a couple of things that I was curious about.
Would you mind saying your name for the,
Yes, absolutely. Rebecca Hatt. Scarborough resident, incidentally. I was really interested, there was something recently passed, I think a few days ago, like LD 1829, I wanna say. That was talking about increasing density for lots that are served by water and sewer. We also had LD 2003, which was the ADU law. But at least to my personal knowledge, it doesn't seem like that is getting a lot of traction. I'm assuming because homeowners either don't want to become landlords or have challenges accessing funding. It would be very difficult to fund that kind of a project on your own, particularly if you're not a developer and you don't have that kind of knowledge. And some residents may not know that they are able to do that even. But it would be really interesting, I think, to see more infill development if you can, find a way to maybe partner folks with some kind of a funding package to see if that is even workable. Maybe it's not, right? Building right now is insanely expensive, so it's really difficult, at least in my mind, to make the numbers work. We've looked at building houses and renting them out, and it's just like not super feasible right now, just because you can't make enough money. So it would be tough to break even, but I think it'd be really interesting to see if there were opportunities with grants or just with, getting some local banks together to see if there were good financing options that you could present. The other thing I've seen people do really successfully that I thought was interesting is there was a city recently, I want to say in North Carolina, it might have been Raleigh, that did pre-approved ADU designs. So they
Yep.
had like a suite of several designs that they handed to the public and said like, you can do this with minimal hurdles. Here is
Yeah.
all of the architectural work that you don't have to pay for, and like go wild, you got this. So I think like that could be maybe interesting in terms of infill. I know infill is a little slower than larger scale developments, but
Also,
also
every little bit helps.
yeah, and it seems
Yeah,
like the larger scale
I think
development.
those are great ideas. I really appreciate that. And one of, kind of related to that too is as we think about growth permits and the impact of growth, um, it seems that infill has a, less of an impact on the town than new road growth would. And so maybe that's another way to be encouraging developers and small developers to do infill work, right? And maybe this group could be doing some, I don't know what you call it, but sort of not advertising, but promotion of some of these
There you
new
go.
opportunities that come from these new LDs that are out. So thanks for that idea. Or those
Started
ideas.
talking a while ago, Brian, about a catalog of resources, right? Or references that this group could offer or manage. And,
Yeah.
that information would fall into that category, because that would be helpful if people had a starting point.
Yeah. That would be great. That's super. Um, well, Karen, I think that's a good conversation related, that actually kind of wraps up both the workshop. It gets a little bit into these other strategies to reduce housing costs and kind of things we can do with other resources. It gets a new element into the mix. I think it also touches on our public comment. So thank you very much. Um, one of the other things I had hoped to talk a little bit about tonight was one thing, that kind of speaks to infill a little bit. And I'd like to talk about it in our next meeting too, but is just this very macroeconomic notion of the fact that households are changing, in society and in town. And the houses that we have aren't, right? So Scarborough has a lot of houses that have a certain number of bedrooms in them, and in some sense, there aren't enough people to fill them, right? And it turns out that the houses that are really expensive that keep selling are the big houses. And so, one of the things that shows up on the agenda is, the average household size has shrunk, by 0.1 persons, which, doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot. And when you look at, how many people and how many bedrooms we have in our housing stock here in town, you see that there's generally a lot of empty bedrooms in our housing stock. And so, the question kind of comes up, what can we do to be encouraging smaller house development? What could we be doing which I think would then translate to more affordable house development, which might translate to more infill development because you can fit smaller houses in smaller places. And so I want to kind of open up an introductory discussion about that, and just sort of hear some thoughts and see if that resonates with people. And then have that be something we think about in our next meeting.
There are communities that have undertaken to try to advance that strategy? Or is that an unknown to us?
I don't know.
Advance the strategy was trying to get people to build smaller houses.
Yeah,
I don't know that I've seen that as a direct, like, that's what we're trying to achieve. I think there are zoning tweaks in other communities that are allowing that to happen. But I'm not sure I've seen that stated as the objective.
yeah, it's like, let's not reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
Somebody's done this
Right.
before, so let's take advantage of all their efforts.
Okay.
I mean, Autumn might know about that because she's connected to
Hmm.
planning departments in the entire state. too.
Mhm.
She agreed.
I bet she would.
Yeah, she would.
Yeah,
So just for a future.
Yep.
And
Yep.
if you could bounce that off Autumn.
yeah, absolutely. And if she doesn't, between the two of us, we can certainly do a quick survey of
Yeah,
I don't know if you guys have done that, but what are the housing goals of the surrounding communities and how have they articulated their goals? So I'm not sure if I haven't done that, and I don't think Autumn's done that, but
right. And you kind of wonder, you've got some very similar communities in Cape and South Portland, right next door. And they're active. Both communities are proactive.
Yeah.
Brian, have you seen, in your presence as chair, have you guys ever done a search of similar zoning categories and strategies from other
I don't
towns?
think that we have, no.
Okay.
No.
These are always good places to start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at these numbers here that are on our agenda, to make sure I understand it. So the first set of numbers is the percentage of housing units by bedroom count.
Yeah.
in Scarborough, right? So if you look at 2 bedrooms, that's 21% of our housing stock, right?
Yeah. Yeah. 2,500. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the one below is a picture of our population by size of family.
That's right.
And it's 30, and saying 2 bedroom or 2 persons is 34%.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So we don't have enough houses for 2 people,
Well, see, if you
Unless they
think,
want a big house.
unless they
well,
want a
yeah,
big
so
house.
you might think about, a 3-person household maybe fits into a 2-bedroom house. Right? Either a 2-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom house.
Yeah, okay,
Depending upon the family, the way the family's kind of working together. If it's 2
Okay.
grown-ups and a
All
kid, or one
Yeah.
kid and 2. So we've got kind of a surplus of houses, and you've got these 4-bedroom houses. You've got 3,000 4-bedroom houses, which it ought to be able to fit 4 or 5 people. And we've only got 2,500 households with 4 or more people in them.
empty nesters.
Yep.
Yeah,
People like
yeah.
big
So it's
houses,
like
apparently.
all these people whose kids have moved off, and then they're stuck with these little McMansions in Scarborough.
Well, they have no place to go.
Well,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
what's selling
I
too.
just went through that.
Yeah, so it's like if we could create a place for, for them to go, it'd be kind of interesting, right?
I
Where
think
do
that kind of speak to why, when we look at affordable housing, most of it ends up being seniors.
Yeah.
Because they sell a house and they have the money to put down,
Yeah,
to buy these things. Versus,
That's right.
younger people that don't have the down payment, so whatever.
yeah. And it might
So
create
what,
kind of an opportunity for, a nice, affordable senior village, or an affordable home ownership senior village opportunity or something. I think we think a lot of times of, um, these affordable home ownerships as younger families. But I'm not sure it necessarily needs to be that. There could be an opportunity for smaller homes that are affordable for seniors. Yeah, kind of for that
Well,
situation that you're thinking about.
if you go over to Hillcrest and
Yeah,
see what's going on there,
yeah,
which is
that's right.
55 plus, and they're putting up homes and they're selling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
There's demand for that, and that's like a senior village.
That's
And
right.
there's one being developed somewhere else here in town, up at Broadturn or something like that.
Oh, interesting.
You know,
well,
Yep.
I'll put my economic development hat on and say, you know, the workforce housing, which is that edge,
yeah,
that is
that's,
critical for, the local employers. Um, and I don't know that even though we've adopted a definition of that, I don't know that we've, as a community, embraced that concept. We know we need it, but what does workforce housing really look like?
well, that's the hard part.
Yeah. And yeah, maybe we need a different name for it, but I mean, it used to be starter homes. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what we talked about. And the I don't know, nobody talks about starter homes anymore because there seems to be no such thing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I know. That's so true.
and I think a starter home concept is a lot more palatable for people.
Yeah.
They understand that.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, I like that.
You start a home village,
Yeah.
there you go.
and how do we do it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So how do we facilitate it, or how we encourage it, or whatever?
What was that?
Scarborough's own Leviton.
Yeah. Yeah. Martintown. What do you think of that, Karen?
There you go. Well, there's a street down there, right? It's Martin Street. Yeah.
No, great.
Okay, so what's your pleasure? Brian, should we be working on putting together a focus group, or
Let's try to
gonna
get
do
some
some more
lenders.
work on this
Let's try to get some lenders together. Let's try to get some developers together. Um,
in the same meeting or separately?
Separate meetings. Yeah.
Just
And
checking.
and then follow up with the council on their priorities. Separate, yeah, as a separate issue. And then follow up on attendance for our meeting.
Okay.
We'll try to
If
get more
we were gonna
attendance.
do something like a developers forum or something like that, are you thinking summer? Are you thinking September? Or
Let's see when people are available. I mean,
Okay.
there's a few there's a few usual suspects to reach out to, and let's just see when let's poll people and see when they're available. And if we can get people together in August, that'd be awesome. And if we can't, then that sounds kind of September-y.
These people who have done business in the town of Scarborough,
think it could be broader than that, but somebody has a specialty. Like I think of Jack Soley, who has done workforce housing without any funding.
right?
He's tried to build houses that just by market rates work. And I guess technically Jack Soley was developed because he owned. I think he still owns part of Firehouse Village. But I don't know what do you think, Brian, everybody, do we limit, there's certainly enough people that have developed in Scarborough, but it seems to me if somebody has a good specialty and they haven't done anything from Scarborough, maybe they get invited too, because we want to know why.
Problem with that is where's that list end, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
If the
I think
Westbrook
if we
Housing
have,
Authority comes, does the Portland Housing Authority come? It goes
Right.
on and on.
I mean, I don't think we need to worry about hurting people's feelings by not inviting them.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think, you know, I think
well,
we're trying to collect
yeah,
information
that's
and,
Okay.
um,
I think we walk before we run.
Okay,
I think you have enough,
here town,
yeah.
okay. So, Brian, you probably know more people than you and Bill probably know more people than any of us, but I'm happy to start a list and maybe pass it around and everybody add any names that they think would be good for that. And I think the sooner we reach out, the
Yeah.
better.
Good.
yeah. Yeah, and I think
Sure.
if we, I mean, I don't know what people think about, I mean, there's probably some metrics about an ideal group size, but you know, sometimes if it's too big, you don't get a lot of voices, and if it's too small, everybody's shy, right? So maybe 5 to 7 is the right number, or you know, something on that order.
I don't know any of our developers who are shy, but
And post the question auto. To have her
right.
weigh in on.
Yeah.
How to frame this, how to bring it off.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Wow.
Bill, to
You
your
did good.
question, the people who have come here, you know, they've got interesting perspectives, and it's also curious why people haven't come to Scarborough, right? They're like,
Yep.
back in the day, there were some reasons why people wouldn't develop in Scarborough that had to do with, yeah, implementations of certain rules, and it used to be a really hard place to do real estate business, and now it's not. So so that would be interesting to hear too, like why people aren't
Very.
coming here.
Learning the hurdles that
Yeah.
are maybe
Yeah.
keeping people out.
You
Without,
may be surprised at the hurdles.
yeah,
Well, except we want them related to affordable housing.
Right,
Purpose,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, right.
right. Absolutely. We're not talking about general development, we're
Yeah.
talking about.
That
affordable.
traffic light at Oak Hill, that keeps me out all the time.
this is good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, good stuff. Any other thoughts or comments from our guests today? Our
Comments? I don't think so.
Okay,
no?
I expect you probably enjoyed the discussion,
We did.
because it's, yeah,
Great. Well, thanks for joining us. It was nice to have you guys.
thanks
You
for.
want to say something?
I don't know. I guess it was kind of already covered in a more professional way of what she said. But I don't know. I was just wanting to say, like, it seems like there's a lot of stuff already going on in town, probably for good reason, because they're the most likely people to help, but with large scale developers, but there isn't a lot for like the little guy, I guess.
Mhm.
So like, you know, people that don't have a few $1 million to toss around into a 50-plex or whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't know, what could necessarily be done, whether, you know, loosening up ADU regulations or other such things, or inflow housing and whatnot. But
Yeah.
That was,
well, that's a good point to think about what, you know, smaller developers or, you know, local folks can do, homeowners can do. And
Can really make a
yeah, I
good
mean, you know, we
impression.
are fully compliant with LD 2003, but we also have some regulations. So if you have an ADU unit, you can't Airbnb it. You can't,
Airbnb, you have to
Yeah.
have maximum of like 2 people, 2 bedrooms, and you have to occupy it.
yeah, yeah. So there, you know, like I said, we're fully compliant, but there are some rules that we have in place. So you know, that's certainly something that could get revisited in the context of affordable housing.
I also think some of those units would just naturally be smaller, like ADUs.
Yeah.
You're gonna throw something in your backyard, you don't want it to overshadow the house, so I
Right.
think most
It-
people would go,
And there are size constraints already.
well, that's also.
Yeah. Okay, so the
We've got
task that I
just
have,
we've got one more item on the agenda, Karen.
ah,
I think Bill Shanahan was gonna take this one.
The adjournment part?
Yes, sir.
You want to make that motion, Brian?
If you would, sir.
So I make a motion to adjourn.
All right, that's a
Second.
friendly motion. All right, so all in favor?
I,
All right.
Well, we can't vote on that. We don't have a quorum, so I'm afraid that we can't end.
So
this
you guys
meeting.
have to
Do we
stay
have
here.
to-
so I go-
Let me know.
I'll let you know how it goes.
that
Thanks,
was a good
everybody.
discussion.
Yeah, really good. Appreciate you guys all being here.
Thank you.